This episode of Storycomic Presents is sponsored by JanusPointPress.com. Watch out for wormholes. Welcome to Storycomic Presents, where we interview amazing storytellers and artists. This is episode 327. I'm your host, Barney Smith of Storycomic.com, and we're excited to have with us the internationally acclaimed artist and illustrator of the Cult of Dracula series, Les Garner. Les,
Hello.
how's it going?
Oh,
We were talking before we went live that it's like you have decades of experience on,
yeah.
working in illustrations, different mediums, 3D, digital. I want us to kind of do a deep dive a bit on, obviously we'll talk about the Reign of Dracula, which is you're here to talk about this, the Kickstarter that's live at the moment. But really curious, Les, how did you get into being so in the world of illustration and art?
I was a comic book artist in a time when comic book artists couldn't get paid, which I guess is pretty much to some degree, the entire existence of comics. But, I started out at 19. I was 19 years old when I left Eastern Kentucky and headed to, I was about 30 minutes outside of New York, where I landed. And worked in comics. Not immediately, of course. I mean, there was a whole struggle of getting in and all that stuff. But once I got work, I ended up working in comics. For the next few years, while doing other jobs, trying to climb my way up the ranks of the indie comics. And that was '93. And if you know anything about comics history through those years, uh, there is a dark time for comics. And it's the mid '90s where just the entire industry decided to take a huge dump on itself, as it
Right.
seems to do about every 10 to 15 years. And it got to where I couldn't get work out of it. So I migrated from the experience I had with comics. The next closest gig I could get was storyboarding. So I migrated to storyboarding, and I had, in order to make myself more employable in comics, um, when I saw in, like 92, 93, saw the coming of computers for, production techniques, coloring, and so on, I busted my chops to figure out how to build a computer back then. Built my first computer, uh, hustled to get a hold of the software that I needed, and started teaching myself. And this was back when it was like Photoshop version 1. So I was teaching myself these things. Um, and as I explored, of course, since I had a computer, I was like, oh, well, I'll throw a game or two on here. And I was playing like, Doom, early, or, pre-Quake stuff, man.
Yep.
Oh, and between that and some of the CG in films, with Terminator 2, Jurassic Park, and the Star Wars edits, um, I realized that I was fascinated with the computer and what it seemed to offer, and I ended up getting into. I was really fascinated with the idea of 3D animation, and I taught myself how to build 3D models initially in code.
Mm.
So, and which is a whole it's a nightmare. That's like it's one of those things. It's like how nuts was I to get into that? Like the very first model I ever built, I think, was a model of R2D2, and I drew it out on graph paper, on 3 pieces of graph paper. They have a numbered grid, so everywhere a line crossed the grid, at an intersection, I could make a note of what numbers, what coordinates those were. And so when you compared the coordinates across all three, you could get X, Y, and Z coordinates for all where all the lines cross. And then you compile those together into a spreadsheet and feed them into a program in DOS that would knit the whole thing together into the facets and create a model. And then would use that stuff to do my own mods on Doom.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I mean it's there's old school and then there's before the school was even built.
Right.
So I mean, I've been involved with 3D stuff since pretty much since almost as long as it's been a thing you could be involved with. So and 3D stuff has actually been my main income through most of this time. Once I stepped into that back then, that ended up it was such a unique skill. I ended up by my mid 20s moving from comics to it was like comics to storyboarding to 3D, and then from 3D into being an art director for a couple of different companies, and then starting my own.
Wow.
So I think I started the my studio name Sixus1 Media, and that was started in 2001. So I
Okay.
think I don't know, 24, something like that, 24, 25.
How difficult it is, or how easy is it for you to kind of keep up with the technology? And it's
It's
almost there's
actually
like a
incredibly easy to keep up with. I
yeah.
would feel, or I feel more, I don't know, I guess sympathy for people who have come into it much later than I did, because
Okay.
if you started at the ground floor, then as you grow over time, you're growing right alongside it, and it just kind of works. You just new thing comes out. It's like, oh well, look, here's this little thing, pop, and it's just a cherry on top. You just keep adding those. But if you started today,
Right.
completely fresh, like one of the things that makes me employable with this stuff is I'm a generalist. I mean, I
Mm.
can pretty much wear any hat in a 3D pipeline, and if you start fresh today and wanted to do that, the learning curve to being able to do that is you're talking about something effectively a 25 to 30-year learning curve.
Wow.
Why everybody that gets into things now, they all pick a facet of it. Typically you'll have someone focuses just on building the model, someone who focuses just on texturing, just on developing UV coordinates for the model, just animating, just lighting, just doing layout of a scene. I mean, there's a ton of jobs that happen inside 3D, and there's a lot of people out there who can do like maybe say three or four, because some of these jobs they're so intertwined with each other that you do pick up on them. And there's a lot of good artists out there, a lot of good 3D artists out there, but there's very few who can bounce from from animation to to scene layout to lighting to mesh development to rigging. Like the main thing that I typically get hired for in the 3D space is as what's called a technical director, where they may have character designs already, but a lot of times I will either be overseeing artists who are building the meshes, and then when the meshes are, or I'll just come in and be the one building the meshes and doing all that work. But then the technical director aspect of it comes in when it's time to take those meshes and rig them for animation. And so
Mm.
I've developed rigs for, I mean, literally thousands of characters at this point.
Right.
But yeah, I would say if I had to put a ballpark estimate on how many characters I've rigged, It's probably in the neighborhood of 8 to 10,000 characters by now.
Is there been? Have you ever like seen a video game, or if you've seen like an or any type of animation work where you just said, "Oh man, I wished I had that job. I would have had so much fun with it."
I don't know. There's stuff that I wish I'd worked on. There's it's funny because I put out a lot of content, a lot of 3D content through a few different stores. A couple of them I've actually was one of the people who helped found them, and and there's a whole world of 3D content out there that's uh, people, buy and download and use in their own projects and things, and it essentially becomes like clip art, like 3D clip art, which is it's like clip art with a whole lot more usage to it. Um, and I pretty regularly see things that I've done turn up in like TV shows, commercials. I see my stuff in games, in like background pieces in games. Probably the craziest one. I'm a massive H.P. Lovecraft fan,
Right.
and I got there was a really nice Call of Cthulhu game came out a couple years ago. I really loved that game. I'm playing through it. I'm 100%ing this game, and I don't actually play that many games. And then I get to the final boss fight, and I swear the boss model was lifted right out of my catalog. I swear it. I mean, it was just uncanny. I mean, I'm looking at it, and of course, I can see some of the edges, some of the geometry edges when I pause it on screen. I'm looking. I'm like, that looks like my mesh. That looks like somebody ran a decimator on my mesh, converted the textures, down-res the textures for a game, and then ran with it because it's but I mean, well, one, the piece that it was is something that anybody could buy it and use it that way. So I can't complain. Um, and two, the actual creature. I mean, it was a. I've seen variations on the theme of that particular creature a few times. So but it was just uncanny to me. So that's like the only game I've ever sat back and played and said, "Man, I really wish I'd have worked on that." That one, I'm like, I should have worked on this. So I mean, I literally put out Lovecraftian content for a solid 10 years. I
Right.
paid a lot of bills with Lovecraft content for a very long time,
Yeah.
and I'm about to do more Lovecraft stuff. Um, I just put the ball in motion doing um, a tarot deck that is
Oh, cool.
yeah, I'm doing a tarot deck that's going to be all like line art and very kind of uh, like an artistic homage to Bernie Wrightson, guys like my hero. And then the whole thing though is paying respect to Lovecraft and the different writers in the Lovecraft mythology and all the characters and things. So yeah, that's coming back around to that.
Mm.
I do. I love my Lovecraft.
Watch out for wormholes, because a good book is a wormhole, whether it's paper or pixels. Explore our artist books and chapbooks, including the winning 2022 Chautauqua Janus Prize Lecture at januspointpress.com. And sign up for news of our upcoming sci-fi sensual and literary collection, Event Horizon. This short story collection on cosmic decisions and their impact is written by award-winning author Stephanie Nina Pizzarillos and features comics, prose, photography, and original canvas work by an array of exciting artists. Visit januspointpress.com. Do you use, it seems that there's like more math involved when it comes to doing the 3D art than it is to saying do
Oh yeah.
sequential art as well. So do you like to bounce back and forth between doing sequential art as compared to 3D art?
Mm-mm. if I'm doing one, that's all I want to do right then.
Okay.
Because
Yeah.
if I'm in comic book mode, then I'm doing comics, which is really what I want to be doing. I've done. I mean, I did comics for the first few years of my career. Switched to 3D and have been up to my eyeballs in 3D for 25, 26 years. I'm I'm kind of past it now. uh, I'm kind of like, I need some time away from that. And it was actually a few years ago see, the 3D stuff has kept me on the periphery of comics the entire time.
Okay.
There's a lot of overlap between the comic book industry and the 3D related industries. And in 2012, I think it was 2012, I started working with Brian Haberlin, who he's colored, tons of stuff for Image and, uh, written and colored Spawn. He was CEO of Todd McFarlane's company for a long time, and Brian knew me from the 3D side of things because he has stuff that he does over there, and I worked with him on a giant graphic novel of his called Anomaly. It
Mm.
was like 300 and some pages, and the artwork inside is all it all looks painted, but it's using 3D models and they're doing an overpaint on them. And they would use the 3D stuff and pose the 3D stuff and take a shot of it and then overpaint from that as references.
Oh,
And
okay.
I developed a lot of the 3D stuff that went into that. And then after that was all done, came back around and we built. I was the art lead and animation lead on the augmented reality for that book, which was one of the first AR apps in comics, and that was kind of wild. So,
So how did you get involved in Reign of Dracula then?
well, it actually goes back to Brian Haverland loosely. Um, while working with Brian, I was having a little gripe fest with him one night where I was like, dude, I love to draw. I draw all the time. I'm always doing concepts. I'm always doing this, and I still draw comic book pages just for fun. When I have time to, I'm like, I would, I was like, and I was complaining back then. I was like, comics are where I started. It's where I want to finish. It's just it. And I was like, I'm like, why is it the industry seems to just crap itself every couple of years? And he's like, he was actually really encouraging. He was like, if you want to do comics, he's like, these days, man, just do one. He's like, do one, put it on Kickstarter, do one, put it on, you know, put it some on Indiegogo um, or he's like, your stuff is good enough that he's like, shop it around to a publisher and you will probably get picked up. And I was like, well, and so when I had exited comics prior to that, quite a few years before, um, I hadn't really. I was I was in the
Mm.
bottom of the game, and so when it blew up in my face and I exited, I hadn't really achieved that much, so I guess I just didn't have that much confidence with it, and and then I'm working with Brian and we talk about stuff and he's like, you should do it. He's like, just do it. He's like, you're good enough, do it. I'm like, well, crap, this guy. I mean, I'm like, okay, I respect this guy. I guess I should give it a shot. And that's when I decided to put together a thing called Apocalypse Girl, and
Okay.
that came together very slowly because I was still full time with 3D stuff like all the time, and that's a oh my god, it can be an absolute drag of a job sometimes with the amount of work that goes into stuff. And
Mm.
but I, a little bit here, a little bit there, started drawing this book called Apocalypse Girl, and I got I got the first 10 pages done and started shopping them around and ended up getting a publisher. did some shows with that publisher. Then that publisher decided they weren't going to be publishing anymore. They closed up and went. They had some of their own printing facilities, and they just focused on printing. So I
Mm.
lost that publisher. And then a couple months after that happened, I was irritated. I was like, no, I was like, this is a load of crap. So I start shopping around. I'm like, somebody's got to take this. I'm like, this. I was feeling real confident with what I had, and a smaller publisher called Insane Comics picked it up. They actually published the first three issues of it, and I did a bunch of shows with them, and that was great. Um, but they eventually folded. I think, to my knowledge, I may have had the only book that was profitable for them,
Oh wow.
and they folded. But before they folded, they had afforded me a chance to go to C2E2 with them in 20, 20 late, very late 2017. It all blurs together. Um, and at C2E2, of course, a few years prior to that, I had first met writer Dirk Manning when I was doing shows with the other company. He and I became friends, and
Mm.
and it's kind of funny. When we first met, he was across the aisle from me. He looks real hard at what I'm doing, what I've got hanging up, and he comes over and flips through a few pages, and he just looks at me and says, "I have to work with you one day." I was like, "Okay, who the hell are you?" And he says, he's like, you've got the Bernie Wrightson influence that I want to see on this one project. He's like, said there was a project that he had written, hadn't finalized the scripts, but he had written a bunch of stuff for, like 5 years prior. Said that he's like, he had just shelved it because he couldn't find the right artist. And then he saw my stuff and he was like, "You're the guy. You're the guy who's got to draw this." And fast forward, C2E2 in 20, I think 2017. I'm there with the publisher I had at the time, and there's an at that show I learned things that would that made it not at all surprising that publisher went under. Let's put it
Mm.
that way. Great people, love the guy, love Jim from Insane Comics, but there were some decisions he made that I thought were cool, but were very wishful thinking in comics. Anyway, that's a whole that opens up a bunch of cans of worms. But at C2E2, Dirk was there with the company that was publishing all of his stuff, Source Point Press. And Dirk comes over to our little booth and sees me there, and I'm signing stuff, and books are moving, and it's doing well. And he's like, asked me if I could take a break. And I was like, yeah, sure. I took a break. And he's like, I got somebody I want to introduce you to. He's like, bring a copy of your book. Oh, all right. I grab a copy of my book. We walk over, and his publisher is there. And his publisher is there just hustling books and selling books hand over fist to people. And he's busy as hell. And Dirk is like, Travis. He yells at him. He's like, Travis. Travis is like, what? And him and Dirk, they yell at each other all the time. They're like, it's funny. They're like an old married couple. And he's like, what do you want, Dirk? I'm busy. And Dirk's like, this is the guy. Travis is like, what guy? He's like, the guy I want to do Homestead. And then Travis stops, looks over, and goes, who the hell are you? And then Dirk pulls the comic out of my hands, hands it to him. And Travis is like, what's this? What am I looking at? What'd you do on this? And Dirk looks at him and goes, everything. He did everything. Because on Apocalypse Girl, I'm the writer, penciler, inker, letterer, colorist, and cover painter. I did all of it. And
Wow.
uh, and when he says that, Travis slows down and starts looking through it, and he's like, "You did all of this?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "It's actually good." I'm like, "Thanks." and and I understand that because a lot of times when somebody tries to do all the stuff themselves, it doesn't work.
Right.
But at that point, I was 20 some years into my career. I kind of know a few things, and but I'm just going with it in stride. And Travis is like, and he flips over and looks at it and goes, and all these publishers, they all know each other, and he goes, "What the hell are you doing with Jim?" He's like, "What are you doing with Jim and Insane Comics?" I was like, "Well, he gave me a good deal. We got a good deal going, and blah 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 blah." And Travis is like, "I would have taken this. You never sent me a submission." I was like, "Didn't know who the hell you were." And then and he's like, "You got anything else you want to do?" I was like, "Yeah, I got other projects I want to do." He's like, "Talk to me after the show. Talk to me after the show." And then he gets back to doing his stuff, and we go on. So I go back. About 3 months later, the Insane Comics closes their doors, and I get a message from Jim saying, we're going out of business. We're closing everything up." And I was like, "Huh, okay, that sucks." So then I immediately messaged Travis, and I mean, I literally had two messenger windows open, and I messaged Travis, and I was like, "Hey, Travis, did you hear Insane Comics is going out of business?" He's like, "No." And I was like, "So looks like I'm a free agent." He's like, "What's going to happen with that book of yours?" I was like, "Well, you said you'd be interested in it." So I was like, "And they've already put out 3 issues, and I'm sitting here with issues 4 and 5 done. I've only got one more issue to do, and it's a 6 issue series that'll be done." And
Right.
he's like, and Travis is like, "Do you have a release letter?" So I messaged Jim right then. And I was like, "Hey, Jim, it's Les. Can I get a release letter from you?" And he's like, "I knew you'd be coming." And he literally had one waiting for me. And he shoots it through there as an attachment, and I drag it and drop it right onto Travis, who then grabs it, and I had a contract within a week.
Oh, wow.
So it was like out of one publisher right into the other. So then Apocalypse Girl comes out through Source Point, and they sat on it for a minute for some reason, but the floppies all came out in 2019, and around Christmas of 2019, the collected volume one came out, and I was slated to do 35 shows in 2020, and I got to do one because of
Oh,
COVID.
wow.
Yeah,
Right.
COVID. Rich Davis, though, at that time was also with Source Point, where he did Cult of Dracula and Rise of Dracula.
Hmm.
And um, I ended up doing a bunch of retailer exclusive covers on some of that stuff. And there was one of those that I did, which I still don't have any of my copies of that I was supposed to get. That irritates me. And I've actually seen the thing on eBay for as high as $250,
Oh, wow.
but which is really weird. Really weird when you see your stuff starting to get price tags like that. But this one piece, part of the dealer's deal was they'd get the original, and I didn't even know Rich. Like, I had no idea who Rich was. I had no idea about anything. I'm just working, and they're like, "You want to do a cover for this, and how much would you charge?" So I was like, "Get my price," and they're like, "All right, cool. We need something that's this stuff for this book." Okay. So I take the notes and everything and do the piece. It was a cool piece, and everybody liked it. And when it's time for me to ship it off, I asked somebody at the company, I'm like, who do I ship this to? And they're like, oh, here, just send it to Rich. So they give me Rich Davis's info. Come to find out, I ended up shipping it to Rich when it was supposed to go to this retailer on the other end of the country.
Oh
But
wow.
because of that mistake, Rich and I ended up talking. And Rich freaking loved the work that I'd done. And, and he was like, dude, he's like, I've got to work with you in the future. He's like, we've got to do stuff together. So fast forward a hot minute, and he comes back around with uh, Prometheus in Chains, which I don't know if the entire series is out yet. I think they're getting. I think number 6 is about to come out. So, but when he went to a different publisher to do a book called Prometheus in Chains, and he asked me to do all the covers,
Oh
like
wow.
covers for all 6 with a variant for each. So I did A and B covers for all 6 issues of that, and issue number 1 sold out like that. It was wild, and I in the middle of working on those, um, in the middle of working on those, this was back in February. I actually had a double ischemic stroke
Oh wow.
and was paralyzed my entire left side, and and my left arm still doesn't quite work. So that's a whole other thing.
Mm.
That's been a nightmare. But they told me I'd never walk again, and I've proven that vastly wrong. So it's one of the reasons I'm up at 5 a.m. though, because I go to the gym, and I work out like a monster on a regular basis. And but I was in the hospital, and I actually completed the last couple covers of Prometheus after like in the couple of days right after I got home from the hospital. And I had already started working before the stroke on Homestead with Dirk. Had the first issue finished, then I had the stroke. I was actually, I had an iPad on my knee as nurses were putting tubes in me, working on stuff for Homestead. And I look over at one of the nurses, and I'm like, could you please not shake me? They're like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm working. I was like, somebody's got to pay for this shit. But so I'm just working through everything, and then after I came out of there and I finished up, everybody expected me to just stop, which
Mm.
I guess is understandable. But I mean, I worked through the stroke. I worked right after, and I completed those covers. And Rich was like, "Holy hell, dude!" He's like, "You're," and somehow I think my work got better. And after those covers and everything, Rich was like, "Dude," he's like, "I'm about to do Reign of Dracula. I want you to do it." He's like,
Mm.
oh, well, the previous summer he had already hired me to do covers for it, which, me being me, I was like, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to do something neat, something I thought would be cool. So when we talked about the covers, right, I want to do these paintings at like 2 feet wide by 3 feet tall, or no, 3 feet wide by 4 feet tall. And he's like, go on. I was like, and they're all gonna connect.
Oh cool.
So last summer, I painted those covers, and the boards for painting them. A lot of the work was done with them mounted to my barn. I was actually painting these comic book covers all with the boards mounted together so that they could go across each other
Oh
in like
nice.
95-degree Southern Kentucky heat last summer. And like the image that you had up at the beginning, I think that wraparound cover, that's the covers for issues 1 and 2 of the series put together, how they connect.
Okay. Right.
Yeah, and then so then there's 4 more pieces like that, and they all connect. The originals of them all connect together to make one piece of artwork that's 4 feet tall by 18 feet long.
Wow. Okay.
It's crazy. We debuted that after it was done. We he was set up at Fan Expo in Knoxville last summer. We unveiled those at that show, and like it was so big that they actually had to wrap around the booth. It was the weirdest. It's like one of the weirdest damn things. You know, it's like who does some crap like that? But there it was. You know, it was neat, and it got some attention on things. So
Right.
then fast forward to after my stroke, and we're talking, and people are asking me how I'm doing. And Rich is like, "You can still draw, obviously." I was like, "Yeah." I was like, drawing is there were a number of things I loved doing that were taken off the table for me for a while. They're still off the table until I get my hand to work again. Um, but I can draw. I
Right.
was like,
Yeah.
dude, my right hand was not affected. My cognition was not affected. I'm solid. I can work, and I want to work. I was like, I will work. I will probably work harder now than anybody's ever seen. And he's like, you want to do Reign of Dracula? You want to do all the inside of it? I was like, yes, give it to me.
Mm.
Give me that
Yeah.
book. I'm going to do it. I was like, if you got any other books you want done, do them. So
Right.
I think he handed me the script for number one, and I turned that book around, pencils, inks, and ink washes in 2 weeks. It's 24 pages.
So, Les, if people want to learn more about your work, where's the best place they could go to?
Uh, I used to say my website, but there's a truism that those who can do and those who can't keep their websites up to date. So, I tend to be working so much that all my presence is kind of behind. I would say look me up on Facebook. Facebook's still, I'm an old fart and Facebook's comfy, so I'm still very active there. You can
Right.
look me up on Facebook or Instagram. Of course, if you plug my name into a search engine, you'll get those. You'll probably get my website at
Mm.
sixus1.com. It's sixus1.com. Um, these days, most of my social media is more focused on comics than anything else, so that's the best place to get those. But there is a lot of that, along with all the other stuff that I've done up on my website, and I recently started updating it with some new paintings and things. And
Oh,
so
good.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Excellent.
So if you click on
Perfect.
it, I think it's gonna do ask you to join my mailing list if you click on it.
Mm.
So I'm probably gonna change that. 'Cause someone recently told me they're like, "Oh, people hate that." I'm like, "Well, I built the thing years ago, man. Give me a break."
Next time you're working on a project, this has been great. I'd love to have you come back on. This has been fun chatting with you.
Uh, I appreciate it, man. I'm notoriously long winded, so I can't help it. It's just a habit, That's
Yeah.
I think it's a Kentucky thing.
Yeah. There you go. All right. Well, thank you so much, Les.
Oh, sure, dude. And anybody watching or listening, please, go check out Reign of Dracula on Kickstarter. We got listed today as a project we love on there.
Right.
So I
Absolutely.
hope that gets some more eyes on it. And we got variant covers up there from a bunch of other artists who Rich is friends with, collects these guys, and there's some pretty wild stuff up there. That one I really like that one. That one's cool. These two are my favorites of the variants. That one and
Right.
the one from Bella.
Right.
I like those.
Yeah.
Uh, her stuff reminds me of Mike Linsner from years ago. The guy who
Right.
did Cry for Dawn.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Cool. Perfect. All right. All
but
right.
that's Reign of Dracula. Hopefully this thing continues to pick up some steam, and go check it out. A lot of fun.
Excellent. All right.
So
All right.
I think we got
Mm.
page. There's if you keep scrolling down, there's like samples of the interior pages and stuff up there.
Yeah.
So real happy with that. I'm looking forward to getting the whole thing done. There is some wild stuff in this book.
All right. Cool. Yeah. So yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you got Project We Love, and easily you'll be able to,
There's some
go
of
on
my
the way in.
interior work on it.
Yeah, perfect, awesome. All right, well, thank you very much, Les.
All right. Thank you, man. I mean, it's nice. And on top of that, I'm 30 minutes from Metropolis, Illinois, where they have the Superman Museum. So
See, there you
yeah,
go.
it's like, people think that, out in the middle of nowhere, they're not going to have access to all their culture. And I'm like, dude, you know, there's people.
Right,
We're here.
right,
We like
yeah.
things. So, you know.